Imagine a world on the edge of a precipice. Europe in the early 20th century was a powder keg of simmering tensions, a complex web of alliances, and a relentless pursuit of power. Nationalism surged through the veins of empires, fostering an environment of distrust and competition. Countries armed themselves to the teeth, their armies swelling in size, their weapons growing ever more deadly. The great powers of Europe, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, France, and Great Britain engaged in a dangerous game of brinksmanship, each nation vying for dominance on the world stage. They formed alliances, promising to defend each other in case of attack. These alliances, meant to deter aggression, ironically, made the possibility of a small conflict escalating into a wider war much greater. Economic rivalry added fuel to the fire. Germany, experiencing rapid industrial growth, challenged Great Britain's long-held economic dominance. Competition for colonies and resources further exacerbated tensions. The scramble for Africa, in particular, created friction between the European powers. Amidst this volatile mix, a sense of unease permeated the air. Ordinary people went about their lives, unaware that the world they knew was about to be shattered by an unprecedented catastrophe. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, provided the spark that ignited the powder keg and plunged Europe into the abyss of World War I. Sarajevo, a city steeped in history and nestled in the heart of the Balkans, became the epicenter of a global conflict. On a sunny June morning, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie arrived in the city for an official visit. The couple, unaware of the plot against them, rode through the streets in an open car, waving to the crowds. Among the onlookers lurked Gavrilo Princip, a young Serbian nationalist determined to strike a blow against Austro-Hungarian rule over Bosnia. As the Archduke's car slowed down, Princip seized his opportunity. He fired 2 shots, fatally wounding Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. The assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the murder of its heir apparent, blamed Serbia for harboring nationalists and issued an ultimatum with a list of demands. The ultimatum, deliberately designed to be unacceptable to Serbia, demanded that Austria-Hungary be allowed to participate in the investigation of the assassination on Serbian soil. Serbia, fearing for its sovereignty, agreed to most of the demands but refused to allow Austria-Hungary to conduct its investigation within its borders. This partial refusal provided Austria-Hungary with the pretext it needed to declare war on Serbia. The intricate web of alliances, woven so tightly in the preceding decades, transformed a regional conflict into a global conflagration. Russia, bound by treaty to protect Serbia, mobilized its troops. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, viewed Russia's mobilization as an act of aggression and declared war on Russia. France, bound by treaty to Russia, declared war on Germany in support of its ally. Great Britain, initially hesitant to intervene, declared war on Germany after Germany invaded neutral Belgium as part of its plan to attack France. Within a month of the assassination in Sarajevo, Europe was engulfed in a war that would forever alter the course of history. The outbreak of World War I shattered the illusion of a peaceful and prosperous Europe. The continent quickly descended into a maelstrom of violence, dividing nations and families alike. On one side stood the Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary, joined by the Ottoman Empire and later Bulgaria. On the other side stood the Allied powers, initially comprising France, Russia, and Great Britain. Italy, initially allied with the Central Powers, switched sides in 1915, joining the Allied cause. The war plans drawn up in the preceding decades envisioned swift and decisive offensives. However, the reality of modern warfare proved to be far different. On the Western Front, a line of trenches stretching from the English Channel to the Swiss border became the defining feature of the conflict. Here, millions of soldiers faced each other across a desolate no-man's land, locked in a deadly stalemate. Germany, following the Schlieffen Plan, aimed for a quick victory by knocking France out of the war before Russia could fully mobilize its forces. They would then turn their attention to the Eastern Front. However, the plan relied on speed and the element of surprise, both of which were lost as the German advance was slowed by fierce Belgian resistance and a costly French counter-offensive at the Battle of the Marne. The failure of the Schlieffen Plan resulted in a protracted war of attrition on the Western Front. On the Eastern Front, the vast distances and harsh conditions favored the defenders. Russia, despite suffering heavy casualties, tied down a significant portion of the Central Powers' forces. The war raged on multiple fronts, from the mountains of Italy to the deserts of the Middle East, drawing in colonies and dominions across the globe. The world had never witnessed a conflict of such scale and brutality. The Western Front became synonymous with the horrors of trench warfare. Millions of soldiers on both sides found themselves trapped in a nightmarish world of mud, blood, and constant danger. The trenches, dug deep into the earth, offered scant protection from artillery bombardments and machine gun fire. Life in the trenches was a grim and monotonous existence. Soldiers endured cramped and unsanitary conditions, plagued by rats, lice, and the constant threat of disease. Rain turned the trenches into muddy quagmires, making movement treacherous and increasing the risk of trench foot, a debilitating condition caused by prolonged exposure to dampness and cold. Attacks, often preceded by massive artillery barrages that pulverized the enemy lines and turned the battlefield into a desolate wasteland, rarely achieved their objectives. Soldiers, advancing across no man's land, faced a storm of machine gun fire that mowed them down in droves. The few who managed to reach the enemy trenches often engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat with bayonets, knives, and even entrenching tools. The Battle of Verdun, fought between February and December 1916, epitomized the futility of the Western Front. German forces, seeking to bleed France white, launched a massive offensive against the fortress city of Verdun. The French, determined to hold on to their sacred ground, poured reinforcements into the meat grinder, vowing they shall not pass. The battle raged for months, costing hundreds of thousands of lives on both sides with little territorial gain. Section 5, Blood and Mud, the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme, launched by the British and French on July 1st, 1916, was intended to relieve the pressure on the French at Verdun and achieve a decisive breakthrough on the Western Front. It became a byword for the horrors of war and the failure of military leadership. The battle began with a week-long artillery bombardment, the heaviest of the war, intended to obliterate the German defences. However, the bombardment failed to achieve its objective, and many German positions remained intact. When the British infantry went over the top on that fateful morning, they were met with a hail of machine gun fire. The German defenders, well positioned and equipped, inflicted appalling casualties on the advancing waves of British troops. The British Army suffered over 57,000 casualties on the first day of the Somme, the bloodiest day in its history. Despite the devastating losses, the battle dragged on for months, characterized by costly frontal assaults and small-scale gains. The British Army, employing new technologies such as tanks for the first time, attempted to break the stalemate, but with limited success. The tanks, slow and unreliable, often became bogged down in the mud or fell victim to German artillery. The Battle of the Somme ended in November 1916, with both sides having suffered over 1 million casualties. The offensive achieved minimal territorial gain and failed to break the stalemate on the Western Front. Section 6, New Technologies of War, a Grim Advance. World War I witnessed an unprecedented development of new technologies, transforming the nature of warfare and ushering in an era of mechanized conflict. The war spurred innovation as each side sought to gain an advantage over the other. However, these technological advancements came at a terrible human cost, increasing the lethality and brutality of the war. The machine gun, already in use before the war, came to dominate the battlefield. Its ability to fire hundreds of rounds per minute transformed infantry tactics, making frontal assaults costly and ineffective. Soldiers on both sides quickly learned to seek cover and dig trenches for protection from the devastating fire of machine guns. Artillery, too, underwent significant advancements. Guns became larger, more accurate, and capable of firing high-explosive shells over vast distances. Artillery bombardments could pulverize enemy positions, turning battlefields into desolate moonscapes. However, the indiscriminate nature of artillery fire often resulted in heavy casualties among both soldiers and civilians. The tank, a revolutionary weapon designed to break the stalemate of trench warfare, made its first appearance on the battlefield of the Somme. Early tanks were slow, unreliable, and vulnerable to artillery fire, but they demonstrated the potential of armored warfare. Airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, quickly evolved into weapons of war. Pilots engaged in dogfights high above the trenches, while bombers dropped bombs on enemy positions, supply lines, and even cities. Perhaps the most horrifying development of World War I was the introduction of chemical weapons. Chlorine gas, first used by the Germans at Ypres in 1915, caused excruciating pain and death by suffocation. Phosgene gas, introduced later in the war, proved even more deadly. The use of chemical weapons, a violation of international law, added a new level of horror to the already brutal conflict. Section 7. Echoes of War Personal Stories. The grand narratives of World War I often obscure the individual experiences of the millions who lived through it. Behind the statistics and battle maps lie countless stories of courage, sacrifice, and loss. These personal accounts provide a poignant glimpse into the human cost of the war. One such story is that of Wilfred Owen, a young British officer who served on the Western Front. Owen, a gifted poet, captured the horrors of trench warfare in his haunting and visceral poetry. In his poem Dulce et decorum est, Owen describes a gas attack, painting a vivid picture of the suffering and death that such attacks inflicted. Another compelling story is that of Vera Brittain, a young Englishwoman who served as a nurse during the war. Brittain's memoir, Testament of Youth, provides a moving account of the war's impact on women and the home front. She recounts the challenges of nursing wounded soldiers, the emotional toll of losing loved ones, and her growing disillusionment with the war. Letters written by soldiers to their loved ones back home offer another window into the personal experiences of war. These letters, often filled with a mixture of humor, boredom, and fear, provide a glimpse into the daily lives of soldiers in the trenches. They wrote of their longing for home, their fears for their loved ones, and their hopes for a swift end to the war. The stories of these individuals, and countless others like them, serve as a reminder that behind the grand narratives of war lie the personal tragedies of those who fought and died in the trenches. Their stories personalize the conflict, reminding us of the human cost of war and the enduring legacy of trauma that it leaves behind. Section 8. A World Transformed, the Legacy of the Great War. World War I ended on November 11, 1918 at 11 a.m. when an armistice agreement between the Allies and Germany went into effect. The guns fell silent on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, marking the end of hostilities. The world had changed irrevocably. The war to end all wars, as it was naively called, had claimed the lives of millions, shattered empires, and redrawn the map of Europe. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefields. It accelerated social, political, and technological changes, shaping the course of the 20th century. The war led to the collapse of empires, the rise of new ideologies, and the emergence of a new world order. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian empires, weakened by the war, collapsed, leading to the creation of new nation-states. The war also gave rise to the Soviet Union, the world's first communist state, following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917. The war had a profound impact on the lives of women. With men away fighting, women took on new roles in factories, hospitals, and other sectors of society, challenging traditional gender roles and paving the way for future advances in women's rights. The war also accelerated technological advancements in medicine, transportation, and communication. The development of new medical techniques and technologies improved the treatment of wounded soldiers, while the need to transport troops and supplies led to advancements in automobile and airplane technology. Section 9. The Treaty of Versailles and its consequences. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended World War I. However, instead of fostering lasting peace, it sowed the seeds of future conflict. The treaty, driven by a desire for revenge and retribution, imposed harsh penalties on Germany, blaming it for the war and demanding reparations that crippled its economy. Germany was forced to cede territory, disarm its military, and accept full responsibility for the war. The treaty's punitive measures created resentment and instability in Germany, fueling nationalist sentiment and paving the way for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The humiliation of Versailles poisoned relations between Germany and the victorious Allied powers, creating an environment of mistrust and bitterness that would contribute to the outbreak of World War II just 2 decades later. Beyond Europe, the war had a profound impact on the Middle East. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire led to the creation of new nations, often with arbitrarily drawn borders that ignored ethnic and religious divisions. The war also exacerbated tensions between European powers and their colonies, contributing to the rise of nationalist movements and the eventual dismantling of European empires in the decades that followed. The Great War, as it came to be known, cast a long shadow over the 20th century. Its legacy continues to shape our world today, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked nationalism, the horrors of modern warfare, and the importance of diplomacy and understanding in international relations.